experience in Unity churches has never been the case until now, that I've seen a group of people gather around what I actually know to be potentially the highest teaching available to human beings, and that's grace. It's a word that for many of us has remained somewhat fuzzy and a bit confusing, but we've been devoting all of our time to the exploration of what that really means. And it is quite extraordinary. We come to it, I think, when we've suffered enough. It's rarely been the case that I've seen someone come to know and be acquainted with and begin to embody in any consistent way what we might call grace, until they got to the place where they just had enough of doing it my way, so to speak. And there starts to be a realization and a memory, because we've had the experience time and again. The greatest upliftments and inspirations and healings have always occurred at some moment when some kind of letting go happened, some kind of surrender, some kind of, I don't know, we're all made differently. In my case, I often had to exhaust my own efforts before that kind of letting go could happen. I would try and try and try and try to get it right, and then suddenly feel exhausted from the effort. And no matter how high and good my intentions may have been, as I look back, there was still somebody trying to do it, some effort. But that's what makes grace imperceptible, really, to a lot of human beings. We were born onto earth, we were conditioned to believe that any kind of success in this world requires an awful lot of work, that we have to try very, very hard. And grace says just the opposite. It says this victory is obtained in the opposite way that the world values things. It occurs in a moment of complete surrender. When we finally reach a place, somehow, maybe it's only in regard to one circumstance at one moment, or another circumstance at another, or maybe we've reached a place where we're just done altogether. We're just done with the work and the effort and the struggle. And something in us just lets go at some level we can't even see. And I do believe. It is only a belief. And in the book study program that we're promoting, we're cautioned not to believe anything too strongly, because beliefs are what? Words. What we're really attempting to do is wake up to the still, silent reality, which is the real source of true power. But I'm just relating to you as a human being. I'm saying, I do understand that we are speaking of a very high frequency of energy, one that human beings have not often come to, except in little bits and pieces and parts. And we're holding out the possibility that maybe for once on earth, in one place, it's never happened, really, it never has happened, that a large group of people finally caught the vibration of grace. And they figured out that all they had to do was stop doing so much. That it meant letting go, and letting go, and then letting go of letting go. I mean, that requires an amazing kind of faith. And we really have to have worn out the world's way of achievement to get to it. So I'm not suggesting to you that this is just snap your hands and grace comes and all the problems release happened, usually below the level of anything you could really reach. It just sort of let go. And all of a sudden you felt yourself lifted and your eyes were opened. And suddenly you saw through all appearances and you realized, oh my God, I've been blinded by my obsession and concern with trying to control how life unfolds. It's actually unfolding perfectly. Everything is already in divine order. Every person is already completely holy. The perception that individuals are wrong or bad or flawed is a blindness in me. And it's erased. So, to talk about grace without talking about suffering is impossible. This book study program that we're about to embark on next month will ask us in the beginning to take a very, 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 very careful and close and very precise and simple look at the actual cause of suffering. Because I think if we look in the deepest parts of our hearts, that's what we really want. We want to not suffer anymore. And by suffering, I don't mean we're hand-wringing and we're in some terrible, deep emotional pain. I mean we're just battered back and forth by occasional frustrations and contractions, and opinions rise in our mind and cause us to see things in a way that look like other people are wrong and things are going wrong. It just happens because we're born on earth and we're trained that way. We're conditioned that way. And in the end, we know we need something larger than ourselves to help us finish removing that old conditioning. And that's the grace that I invoke and I invite. So we're looking at the suffering. We've described it week after week in pretty much the same terms. I'll say it again. Suffering is the result of attempting to control the uncontrollable. If you look very, very carefully, trying to make something happen that you have no control to make happen causes a kind of contraction, a pulling in, a tightness. The word suffering in its essence really just means resistance. Underneath it may be a number of very simple attitudes. One of them is, things shouldn't be this way. Life should not be the way it is right now. It should be different. Looking really carefully at that underlying, often hidden attitude and comparing it to, just to say, even a universal perspective, we would have to notice that it's insane. Life is this way. It might not be how we're interpreting it, but it is as it is. And they didn't ask you to vote before they made it this way, so to speak. And I think what happens when we start to say, wait a minute, I don't really want to fight life anymore. Maybe I want to see it differently. Maybe I want to penetrate and perceive that there's more going on here than meets the eye. That in some way, shape, form, something really good is unfolding here. But I'm preventing myself from seeing it or knowing it or experiencing it because this hidden attitude that somebody, it's usually somebody, should be different than they are. If that person would only be different, I would be happier. Thank you for laughing. I needed that. As you can tell, there's almost an intensity this morning. It's actually driven by what I started out to say, and that is, for whatever reason, something dawned on me, and I vision of the first time I walked into a Unity church after years of suffering. And I could not believe my ears when I heard a minister tell me there was nothing wrong with me, that I wasn't flawed, and that I wasn't a sinner, and that God doesn't judge people who send them to hell. That that's a big false doctrine perpetuated by the ego. And I sat on the back row like all newcomers usually do. You guys are courageous and got up in the middle. And I wept. And I felt something that I bet it was the same words, very close to the words you felt the first time you walked in a place like this. And you thought, oh my God, I'm not alone. And knowing deep in my heart that this stuff isn't true. There's not something wrong with me. I don't have to be afraid of going to hell. I'm already there. And I didn't get there because God sent me there. It happened because I believed in a condemning, judging kind of God instead of a universal, ever-present, infinite love as the nature of reality in God. So that's really all we mean by grace, is coming all the way home all at once. Instead of making 40,000 little short steps. And I know you're familiar with this. You reach a certain critical point in a certain particular situation that has persisted and consisted, whatever it was, and it's caused so much pain and suffering. And you kept trying to fix it. You kept trying to fix yourself, and you kept trying, and you kept trying, and you kept trying, and finally something, and you let go. You might not be as weepy as I am. You may not have cried, but you felt the weight lift. It just lifted. It just disappeared. And your eyes opened differently, and you realized that everything in the world of form comes and goes. Trying to control it and hang on to it and push it away can never do anything but cause suffering. It is resistance to what is. Another one of the hidden attitudes is things shouldn't have been the way they were. And this is the common human story. My parents didn't treat me right. I didn't get the same start as everyone else. I was born the wrong color, the wrong nationality, in the wrong town. I had the wrong brother, the wrong sister. The wrong things happened, and I got hurt. It shouldn't have happened. But it did. And there's another picture. In the simplest of terms, I just call it the big picture. And you already know the big picture because it's been revealed to you over and over again that the things that you thought were so terrible, once you stop fighting them and resisting them and you let go into it, it all cleared up. So the message of grace is not always the most popular message because it asks something of us that runs counterintuitive and counter all our conditioning. It says instead of fighting and working and struggling, let go and surrender. Close inspection of any scripture will show you over and over and over again that this has been the universal, underlying, deepest theme in spirituality. That what the world looks like is this big, insane struggle of human beings trying really hard to be right and not be wrong and get it right and not do it wrong. When what was wrong was our perception. What caused the persistence of the pain and suffering was our struggling against it. One final attitude that gives rise to human suffering is demanding that something be different. Demanding it. It is this way, and we're see how insane that is? Now, how it is may not be how it looks. Scripture tells us time and again, do not judge by appearances, suggesting to us something really will turn your head if you think about it. That the way you're seeing things is distorted by something you're believing that you might not even remember when or how you started believing it, and you might not even know you still believe it. So we have this thing called the Holy Spirit, and a lot of people, especially in this church, there have been even arguments about, how much do we want to emphasize Christianity and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not going to go there with you, but the term really just means whole spirit, holy, whole. It's based in the fundamental principle that everything is already one. And that oneness already is all wisdom and all love and all power. There are no limits to it whatsoever. It's documented throughout history, though we don't see quite as much of it as has been reported at other times in history where it altered a human being's entire perception and experience of life in the blink of an eye. There's nothing about the message that says there has to be a lot of struggle. All it really says is, are you done enough with trying to insist on you having it your way? Are you willing to let go of the idea that you really know what's best? And trust that something grander and more whole actually knows what it's doing. And that if you would quit fighting it, it would suddenly become more benign in the way that it manifested and unfolded in your life. That's all the message of grace really has ever been about. The failure to look at what suffering is, all it is this. And pushing and pulling against what is. Attempting to control things that are not ours to control instead of letting go and allowing grace to simply unfold. If there's a requirement to grace, other than to understand what isn't grace, so we stop fighting it, I would say it's simply the observance of the still, silent power in which we live and move and have our being, which largely goes unnoticed because we were conditioned and taught in life that how things happen is the most important of all values. And grace says, no, pay more attention to the field, the infinite, invisible, qualityless field in which it's happening. Because that infinite, invisible, qualityless field is infinite in its power and its potential and its wisdom. And it's that which has actually given us birth and breathing us and beating our hearts. And we're just being called, if we can hear it, if we've had enough of feeling the weight of trying to carry the world around and force it into shape, we may begin to want to give just a little bit more attention to the still, silent, infinite, invisible dimension. In the old days, the old metaphysicians used to call it the fourth dimension. I don't know much about science, and today's science probably wouldn't language it that way. But it is obvious that most of us are only attending to three dimensions most of the time: height, width, and depth, form, and shape. But it's very easy and very obvious to look around and see that the room is largely without width or depth or height. It's still and it's silent. king. It's a wonderful story. It's about a king in a far off jungle somewhere. And he has this wonderful servant that just will do anything for him. But this servant has one really irritating quality. He is one of those positive thinkers to the nth degree. No matter what happens, all he has to say is, "Oh, don't worry. There will always be a blessing in it. There's a blessing in everything." And you know, when something really hurtful just happened, that's not exactly what you want to hear. You know, a moment of sympathy, you know, and compassion could be in order. But this servant skipped that part. He was just too busy seeing the blessing in everything, and that's all he could see. So the king and the servant are traveling through the jungle one day, and the servant is, of course, going ahead of the king, and he's got a machete, and he's chopping a path through the jungle. And the servant stops every once in a while to smell a rose and affirm its beauty and its wonderful scent. And the king is slowly getting more and more irritated with the servant. At one point, it feels like the servant is slowing down their progress so much, he just grabs the machete out of his hands. "Give me that." And he starts to chop himself through part of the way through the jungle, but he misses the vine and chops off his little toe. The servant looks at him and he says, "Oh," he says, "don't worry." He says, "There's a blessing in everything." He tears off the hem of his robe and he wraps up the king's toe. And they begin to head on through the jungle. Once again, the king is letting the servant do the machete job, and the king is kind of limping behind. He's got himself a stick now to support himself with. And as it turns out, you know, once again, the servant stops to smell roses and goes into this big affirmative, everything's wonderful, everything's a beautiful thing. And the king finally just loses it. He becomes enraged. And he grabs the servant and he just throws him into the jungle. And as it happens, just off the side of the path they're chopping through is a long, deep, empty well. And the servant falls down into the well. The king, cursing now, continues to hobble through the jungle with his stick. And as it happens, a tribe of headhunters finds him. And they take the king and they say, "Oh my God, our medicine man is looking for a sacrifice to the great volcano god. Here we have the king of another village. What a perfect sacrifice." So they bind him up, tie him to a stick, throw him over their shoulders like a stuffed pig, and cart him off to their village. When they get to the village, the medicine man is at first quite enthralled with this great sacrifice. They know they must give to the volcano god. But then as the king begins to as the medicine man begins to inspect the king, he finds his toe chopped off, and he says, "Oh my God, this will never do. He's imperfect. We cannot give an imperfect gift to the volcano god. It would be unacceptable." So they untie him and turn him loose. And the king's heading back through the jungle limping, and he starts to think to himself, "You know, that servant is right. There was a blessing in this." And as he's headed along, he's thinking he's going to go back and get the serpent. And he knows exactly where the serpent is because he can hear him whistling from the bottom of the well. When he gets to the serpent, he looks down at the serpent and he throws him a rope. He says, "Oh my God." He says, "Here, let me out of here." He says, "I'm so sorry." He said, "I was just so wrong." He said, you were really right." He said, "I don't know if you can ever forgive me." The serpent looks at him and he says, "Forgive you?" He said, "Why would I need to forgive you?" He said, "If you hadn't thrown me in this well," he said, "there's nothing wrong with me. I would have been a perfect sacrifice." You see, he said, there's a blessing in everything. not judging by appearances, and trusting grace. Thank you.